This is the weekly outlook here at XM.com. We'll be having a look at the week ahead. I'm Christina Marujos, and joining me today is senior investment analyst Rafi Boyadjian. So, Rafi, one would argue that it's somewhat a quieter week. However, it's going to be a busy week regarding data out of the U.S. We're expecting ISM PMIs and, of course, non-farm payroll. So, how do you see the dollar being affected by this?
The dollar at the moment is, of course, riding at three-week highs. It got a bit of a boost, mainly on the back of weakness of other currencies, but it had also been lifted over the past couple of weeks or so on those falling risks of a U.S. recession. So next week, what we're going to get from the data will be important on whether or not the investors will remain optimistic that the U.S. isn't headed for a recession. We're going to have the ISM manufacturing and non-manufacturing PMIs, as you mentioned, and of course the non-farm payrolls report. The last manufacturing PMI, we saw actually the index fell below 50, the first contraction in 3 years. This time around, we're expecting a bit of a bounce back above 50. On the other hand, the non-manufacturing PMI is expected to weaken a little bit. And looking at the non-farm payrolls report, we're not expecting any dramatic revelations there. We're expecting a slightly stronger report than in August for September. Of course, wage growth will again be watched very closely because we have seen some signs that perhaps consumer confidence is weakening a little bit, and so strong wage growth would be supportive of continued consumer spending, which is very important for the U.S. economy. So it's basically what we're looking at. The data might not have a major impact. On the other hand, any big misses there could be pretty significant for the dollar.
I see. Now let's move into Australia, because investors are highly anticipating a rate cut by the RBA at its October meeting. So how do you see the Aussie being affected?
As far as the Aussie is concerned, the rate cut is more or less priced in for October. So what the RBA will say in its statement will be more important, whether or not the Aussie goes higher or lower after the decision. So we did hear from Philip Lowe, the governor, in recent days. He actually sounded a bit more optimistic about the growth outlook for Australia. On the other hand, he did emphasize the importance of keeping the exchange rate low. So markets are still expecting a rate cut, but we might sense some hesitation for additional rate cuts in the statement. So if that is indeed the case, then the Aussie might get a bit of a lift.
Now let's have a look at the Eurozone, which along with the UK did not have a particularly good week. We've seen both the pound and the euro losing ground. So do we have any important drivers this week that can help the currencies?
Well, it's going to be fairly quiet for both the UK and the Eurozone. We're going to have flash inflation numbers for September out of the Eurozone. We're expecting the headline rate to stay at 1%. So that's not going to have a major impact on the euro, especially as the ECB is now likely to stay on hold, having announced a big policy change that we're not expecting any changes again anytime soon. As for the pound, of course, the Brexit developments are the biggest driver for sterling. We might see some knee-jerk reaction to the PMIs next week for manufacturing and services, but the focus is on what's going to happen on the Brexit front. It's looking increasingly unlikely that we're going to have a general election before October 31, so the focus now is on whether or not Boris Johnson can secure a deal before then. So that's going to be the key thing to watch out for over the next few weeks for sterling.
And finally, let's move into Japan, because the Bank of Japan will publish its summary of opinion of its September meeting. It had, of course, signaled a possible easing at its next meeting in October. So do you think there's going to be maybe an unexpected revelation in the summary?
So that's what we're going to be watching out for. Investors want to see the extent to which policymakers discussed whether or not further stimulus is needed for the Japanese economy. So if we were to get any hints of that, or stronger hints than what we got from the statement, then we could see the yen coming under pressure a little bit. As that would boost expectations of a rate cut for the Bank of Japan's next meeting at the end of October.
Rafi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the Weekly Outlook here at XM.com.